5-minute penalty to Chicago, a game misconduct, and then Manson having words with Steven. And now Butcher gets into it. We're going to have a brawl, folks. Stand by.
What's going on, everybody? Tyler Cash here, and it is another episode of Fourth Line Goon. It's a Sunday afternoon. I'm enjoying a nice vodka energy drink with my Michael Myers glass.
Love it.
Watching some football because there's only one hockey game on. How you doing, bud?
Good. My unmarked glass of water. No alcoholic beverages today. But yeah, taking in more football. You have Stars versus Senators. Not really an exciting game. Brady Tkachuk still isn't in the lineup. I mean,
let's talk about that. That's weird, right? Because he just announced that extension. It's a really good leeway into our notes here, talking about the fact that Brady Tkachuk held out basically as long as you could, right? And then he signed a 7-year deal worth $57.5 million with the Ottawa Senators. So that's $8.2 million AAV, and he's still not in the lineup. It's cited as personal reasons. Why is he still not playing?
Well, I think it's one of those things where you go, 2-3 weeks of training camp, right? And you're just not even skating with the team. You're not doing anything there. So it's probably a ramp up period is my guess. And in terms of that, I mean, you could have maybe squeezed him into the game today with knowing that you're off for 4 days on top of it. But I think that's really what it is. And I think that's kind of the general expectation with hockey is if you do have that kind of, I guess, you're holding out, if you will, during training camp and you go over the time period of training camp, preseason, and games start kicking in, probably unless you're Connor McDavid level, you're definitely not jumping right into the lineup. And I think that's kind of what it is, quite honestly, just to make sure he's up to speed, make sure he's all good to go on his side and really going off that's my assumption. But I don't think it's anything more than that as opposed to personal reasons. I think it's more, a collective approach to let's get the team acclimated with him. Let's get everything set up here. And then let's have him jump in the lineups. There's no issues with that. Conditioning, chemistry, you name it. So,
yeah, because I guess he was sitting out training camp, just kind of playing that tag game back and forth with the franchise to get more money or to get the term he wanted. I know that the rumor was that he didn't want to sign full term. That he was hoping to kind of get that same amount of money, but for less time. I mean, I guess we'll never really know as far as that front goes, but his first game with the team is going to be Thursday against the San Jose Sharks. Part of me also thinks that that's an easy first game, right? It's not against a rival. There's really no pressure. Whether or not he can perform well, and signing such a massive contract, especially when their team doesn't really have very many studs. There's going to be a lot of pressure, a lot of eyes on him, I guess. So he wants a solid start, right? I mean, why not go against a weaker opponent that's not necessarily a rival?
I mean, yeah, you can say the same against the game today that's happening right now with the Stars, but yeah, I think it's a combination of everything, as we mentioned, just getting acclimated with the team, missing training camp, probably not really skating hard for the last 2-3 weeks, and just getting back into the swing of things. It's the Senators. It's not like they're expecting to do anything this year still. So let's take it easy type of a thing, maybe. I don't know. But I think there's also the flip side, as Blues fans would know, and maybe even the Tkachuk's in the back of their mind, right? Keith Tkachuk pretty much resides in St. Louis. Matthew Tkachuk, Brady Tkachuk, both pretty much St. Louis born and raised. And, Matthew Tkachuk's going into the final year of his contract. Brady Tkachuk, was unsigned. Maybe I get a bridge deal and getting out later on. Who knows? But looks like that pipe dream is not happening. It looks like with that 8-year deal Brady signed
right now. But do you see it happening eventually, or is that wishful thinking? I know a lot of Blues fans are wanting the Tkachuk brothers on the same team.
I mean, it's interesting to think about it, right? Because I think it's going to depend on what Matthew does here, with his next contract, because, Brady Tkachuk, yeah, I signed an 8-year deal. That's a long time, but he's only going to be about 30 years old, when that ends. And obviously Matthew Tkachuk's only like a year and a half older than him as well. So maybe the situation where Matthew Tkachuk signs like a 7-year deal somewhere, right? And then it's all of a sudden, 7 years down the road, they're both, 30 and 30, or I guess 29, 30, 30, 31, whatever it is. And, maybe then they sign in St. Louis, who knows? But I mean, again, I don't know if that's going to even be on the table at that point, depending on where the Blues are as a franchise. So
It's hard to think Matthew's going to stay put in Calgary. I mean, why would he? I mean, the dude's a stud. The franchise seems to be in shambles as far as figuring out their identity.
Yeah.
Yeah, the goaltending has always been a big question mark there. So yeah, I mean, he's a great athlete and an amazing hockey player, and he's going to want to go somewhere where he has a potential future. Calgary's definitely not a landing spot for a lot of those studs. It's a lot of those starting spots for people to figure out their footing. But once they figure it out, they want to go somewhere to contend. Not necessarily St. Louis being a high on that list of contenders, but I mean, as you mentioned, his father ties in with the league, or I'm sorry, with the franchise, and every Blues fan ever would love to see at least one Tkachuk on that roster.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Brady, 125 points in 198 games with the Senators. He got that A last season. It's hard to not think that he's going to be there long term, maybe be that captain. They haven't had a captain since Erik Karlsson left in 2018. One could argue that he's the face of that franchise, and they really need a leader in that locker room.
Listen up, Goons. Gotta interrupt the podcast to talk about another one of our amazing sponsors, Shortside Co., a hockey apparel and accessory company. Established in 2020, Shortside is a Minnesota-based company with all 4 owners having a combined 25 years of professional hockey experience. All of their tape is made in the USA, tested and certified by NHL players, including Nate Schmidt. We had him on the podcast, so if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and check it out. He's a beauty. All of their products are created by players, for players. Going shortside is a lifestyle. But why go shortside? Well, scoring goals is their passion. There are many variables that come into play in order to score a goal high on the short side, but it all starts with a perfectly executed tape job. After scoring goals in every league from mites to the NHL, they are confident that their product will be a staple in any locker room. For individuals and organizations looking to join the Shortside community, go to www.goshortside.com.
So it's interesting. I think you have 2 choices there. It's either going to be Tkachuk or you have Thomas Chabot as well, who, again, is elite defenseman. He's on the Senators. He signed what I think a max deal, like 8x8, I think, last year. So, I mean, that's the option on the table. Tkachuk's an option on the table. Picking between the 2, I might say Chabot might be more of the captain. Granted, he's been with the team, I think, slightly longer. I guess not slightly, like his whole career since 2016, but also a couple years on him, maybe be able to handle and get those veteran guys kind of amped up a little bit more than a 22-year-old possibly. I don't know if that factors into it or not, but it's got to be one of those 2 guys for sure going forward whenever they decide to make that happen.
Not to mention Brady can be a hothead, and he seemed overly confident before last season. I remember that interview on Spit and Chicklets, and he's like, "Yo, we're the real deal." He convinced me too. I was like, "Oh shit!" Like the Senators might be like somebody to watch. Clearly, they have a lot of development issues. They're not quite there.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I mean they got a ways to go. Probably a couple of years off before they even try to sniff playoffs in any regard, but.
Didn't they kind of start to like hit it off though towards the end? Like they didn't make playoffs obviously, but they were really freaking close. And those last games, what was it like last year, the games between them and was it the Oilers? Or there was like the last week of games didn't matter.
Canadians or something.
Yeah, all the Canadian teams didn't really matter at that point because of all the playoffs had already been decided.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean they made a good run. They seem promising as far as the future goes and being a young team, but they definitely have a lot of identity to figure out.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So let's talk a little bit about Jack Eichel, which is still a hot topic amongst the hockey community, to say the very least. By now, everyone that's tuning into this podcast realizes that he has this issue in his neck. He'd like to have this, what the league is considering elective surgery, that he can go another route and kind of heal more traditionally and be ready to play sooner. This surgery that he would like would put him out. If he got it today, it would put him out until February. So what happened recently, to my knowledge, and this actually might be because of Robin Leonard's Twitter rants. I mean, a little bit to do with it, like kind of bringing light to it. The league stepped in last week, and the rumor is that they stepped in and kind of strong armed the situation. Like, hey, this looks bad for us, right? We're under this microscope now. We have this new spotlight with ESPN getting back on board. Like, hockey can be this awesome new thing to a lot of sports fans. Let's get a generational player like Jack Eichel back out there on the ice. It's going to be great for the league, great for any team that could sign him. So the rumor was that they pushed hard last week, and that last Thursday, Jack Eichel was under the impression himself that he was getting traded, and something held that up yet again because
Shocking.
Yeah, right. Because the Sabres have nothing to lose here. They're like, I mean, unless we're forced, which I mean, the league can only do so much, I guess. We don't need to move a guy. We don't need to move him if we're not getting anything back in return. Clearly, they're probably still remembering what happened with Ryan O'Reilly and how hosted they got with that. So they're holding out for like the biggest package, I guess. So the latest rumor is that the Golden Knights are back with another round of offers, especially also with 4 other teams. There's 5 teams that have circled back. A first-round pick seems to be across the board. Prospects seem to be involved. What do you think is going to seal this deal? What do you think is going to sweeten the pot enough for the Buffalo Sabres to pull the trigger and to move him?
Well, I think the tricky part is we don't truly know what these offers are, right? I mean, we're obviously on the outside looking in, number one, but I think they probably want, to some degree, probably a top guy. And what I mean by top guy might be like, and if in this situation, I think it makes sense, they'd be like a top 6 guy who can pot 20 goals at least, maybe a solid 2-way guy, maybe not necessarily a center. Granted, those are mostly 2-way guys, but I'm thinking that a really solid stud prospect, and I'm thinking definitely at least a first and maybe like a second, 2 seconds, a second and a third, depending on the year, is conditional. I don't know. That's my thought on it, quite honestly. And then I think the flip side of it too is, and I don't think it's been discussed that much either, is probably the salary cap retention for Jack Eichel, because remember, whatever Buffalo keeps on, they can keep up to basically $5 million of the 10. They're going to be on the hook for that for 5 years. Yeah. So if they go max, we'll return 50% of his contract for 5 years, your cap is now gone down another 5 million for 5 more years, and you have nothing to show for it besides futures, right? Which just hinders your team for another 5 years at least. So I think it's a situation probably surrounding how much money they're going to keep, as well as what people NHL ready are coming into the mix as well. And you're going to ask it for sure, thinking going to the Knights, right? And I think right now especially that's a very tricky topic, because I know we're going to get into it, but I mean, maybe a segue into it is, you have Pacioretty against the Kings, who's now out a few weeks at least. You have Mark Stone, who growing back, whatever, locked up on him, tweaked, and he's day to day. Who knows how long he's out. And then for you to make a move to get Jack Eichel, you're going to have to move already current NHL talent off the roster already. So you're basically kind of depleting your top 6, top 9, both off injuries, both off of trades, to bring this guy in who's also not going to play for 4 or 5 months. So it's almost like, if you do it, are you just saying, fuck it, if this year's a loss, this year's a loss, it is what it is. And if we can make the playoffs somehow, sweet. If not, we have Jack Eichel for next year. There's just a lot to consider there, right?
I think that's the move. I think that should be the smart move, because fuck making the playoffs, fuck, even making the conference finals. Like, they need to make the push to win the whole damn thing. They've been making these crazy offseason moves. They've been signing this high end talent, and you got to do something eventually. You can't just settle for playoffs. You can't settle for even the President's Trophy. You have to do the damn thing. And yeah, as you mentioned, Pacioretty has a fracture in his foot from blocking a shot. He's out 6 weeks minimum. Mark Stone, they're not really talking about. I was watching this segment for Simbin podcast where they said they think it's an abdominal muscle, but also could potentially be a hernia, which is not good either. It's something you have to either deal with or get fixed. And yeah, then you got Howden, Carrier, and Waugh injured. You got Yamark that's in COVID protocol. Yeah, the first 2 games, they had a defenseman playing a winger position, which they've done before. And then that second game, they had an entire fourth line convinced all AHL players.
Yeah,
and
right.
yeah, they're hurting. They're hurting physically and quite seriously, against the cap as far as everything goes. So yeah, will Jack Eichel help now? No, but if you can somehow fit him under the cap, which the dude is going to be out, they said at least until February. So the next 3 to 4 months. You have Alex Tuck that's also out for that amount of time. You got a lot of dudes out, so you're going to have some room to deal with the salary cap. Actually, I was talking to Lowe the other day about the salary cap, and I said Tommy's the guy to ask about this. So how does the salary cap work? Clearly, you got guys injured, but once they come back, it comes back on the record, correct?
Correct. Yeah, at a prorated amount for
okay, so it is prorated. So this money is still going to be off the cap regardless.
Pretty much, yeah. Essentially, is the best way to look at it. But the problem is, if they come back, unless it's a Kucherov situation, you're not going to have the full amount. You're not going to be able to go, over the cap come playoffs or anything like that. It's tricky in the short term because, like, for example, say a guy has $5 million salary, right? And he's injured. He's out exactly half the year. $2.5 million, you get long-term IR relief, which you can then use the whole year. Effectively meaning you could bring on another guy that's at that $2.5 million mark for the whole year and use him. And then the other, prorated amount would come back on for the rest of the year is my understanding of it.
Okay, so it's prorated regardless.
Yeah.
So they're going to have a little bit of wiggle room that they wouldn't have anyways with these high profile, high contracts, I guess, being off the books even just for a couple of weeks.
So yeah, the thing, looking at things here through cap friendly, the thing that I'm thinking of hypothetically is, what if the Knights, made a package, and I think it would make sense both short term and long term, make a package around an Alex Tuck. He's on IR right now, so is Eichel. You swap the two, you still get the IR money for Tuck for however long he's out. He signed long-term. He signed for 5 years, including this year. He's 25, similar to Eichel. Obviously, production, caliber of player, completely different, right? But maybe that gets them in and allows them to make things happen for this year. But then, again, you might be you're looking at, okay, down the line, it's like, okay, we have all these injuries, but Alex Tuck's coming back. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, Alex Tuck isn't coming back anymore. We're getting a Jack Eichel in 4 or 5 months. And again, that's the point where it's like, do we just say, fuck it, we'll throw in the towel for this season, kind of regroup for next year and go from there? Who knows? Or
at least playoffs, because you're in the South.
Right, yeah, right, exactly.
Division.
So you never know what could happen out of the Pacific for sure. So there's a lot of things.
I guess the big thing about what your proposal was is Alex Tuck. Is he a stud, or is he given the right opportunity? And, clearly he only played 6 games for the Minnesota Wild, did nothing at all. He was packaged with Eric Haula in the expansion draft. And then since then, man, dude, it's hard to turn away from that. When he's healthy, full seasons, 15 goals, 22 assists. We got 20 goals, 32 assists. This is on the third line. And that's impressive to say the least. I think it would be more important to keep Alex Tuck than it would be Peyton Krebs or Nolan Patrick. And as I mentioned, I might have mentioned it in the podcast or just in passing, I think Nolan Patrick was signed and brought on as kind of like this centerpiece. Like he's only signed, I believe, for the next 2 years at 1.2 million, something along those lines. So
yeah,
it's a good gamble, right? He was second overall. He could prove to be a stud. If he doesn't, it's not the worst, but I think he was brought in to be maybe not a centerpiece, that's the wrong word, but just kind of a sprinkle on top, like the frosting.
But that's the problem, though, is you're still going to have to move out cap space. Like you have to. So, even at that point, just again, looking at things, hypothetically is like probably most attractive piece that's healthy that you're willing to potentially move in an Eichel trade that plays the same position is probably William Karlsson. You know what I mean? Signed long-term, about $6 million, reasonable contract, a guy who showed he could play a hell of a good amount of hockey going into Vegas and consistently done it for the most part and earned his contract. But again, where does that leave the rest of the conversations? We don't know. So we can only speculate.
Nothing would surprise me with the moves that Vegas makes. As a fan, I would like them to move very little. The last thing I heard, it was Haig, a first rounder, Krebs, and like a third rounder or something along those lines. And they weren't willing to move Krebs. So my question is it worth it for Jack Eichel? Is he a proven enough talent to make it happen? There's also been rumors tied in with him in Boston. He clearly practices up there. There was like the Snapchat stories of him practicing with some Bruins.
Just at the Red Sox game for the playoffs too a few days back. Yeah.
But is that real? Who knows? The guy's going to bring a lot to any team he goes to. I don't know at 10 million with the whole situation, and whether or not they're going to retain salary is yet to be seen, to be honest. So Jack Eichel watch is still very much on, but at this point, at least the league is stepping in and realizing that it's not healthy for him. It's not healthy for the team or the league. So it feels good to know that we're gonna see a solution sooner than later, whether or not he's playing this year or not.
And personally speaking, I think it's a no-brainer. I feel like long-term fit and ease of having to wiggle around the cap is Boston. You have Patrice Bergeron, says his last year, right? He's 36, gonna be 37. He's got a cap hit of almost $7 million right then and there. Jack Eichel is gonna be on long-term IR most of not all the year, depending on when the surgery happens. Patrice Bergeron, farewell, best of luck to you. Great, have fun in retirement. Who do we have to replace you? A healthy Jack Eichel. Like, there's obviously fits out there for him. There's a lot of ways this could still go. We don't know, but to segue into the Bruins a little bit. Obviously, Charlie McAvoy there with his famed "I hate the fucking Bruins so much" tweet. Just signed his 8 years, $76 million, 9.5 AAV extension max term with the Bruins here about a week or so ago. Good for him. With him, it's interesting because you look at him on paper and you're like, okay, this guy puts up 30 points a year, plus 20 something a year. Like, okay, like, why is this guy getting $9.5 million, right?
Hey, what's up, everyone? We're interrupting the Fourth Line Goon Hockey Podcast to talk about one of our awesome sponsors. Big Balls Kickball is St. Louis's premier adult kickball league, bringing you the best game in town since 2007. Veteran owned and operated, they strive to bring out the kid in everyone, and they let you let loose and make new friends on that field. Big Balls welcomes players from all walks of life, and they pride themselves on being one of the most inclusive leagues out there. If that's not enough, they also offer Big Balls apparel. That's right, they sell clothing, all that stuff, and it's rad. Me and Tommy have some. We've been rocking them. They go back with the retro designs, back to the 90s, back to your childhood, all of that. So be sure to go and check out Big Balls Kickball at www.bigballs.com. STLBigballs.com.
And what I think is very interesting is he's not really ever utilized in the power play. Very little. So it's a situation where he's kind of undervalued on the score sheet and a lot more overvalued in the things that don't come up on the score sheet in terms of, takeaways, sound defense, block shots, positioning, all of that stuff. And I think that plays a lot into it, a lot of those intangibles where, if you're a Bruins fan, you see them day in, day out. But if you're, a Blues fan like myself or a Knights fan like yourself, like you look on paper, you might be like, why the hell does this guy get $9.5 million? But kind of understanding he's not the offensive powerhouse, but he's probably top 3 2A defender in the league, I would say. So
plus $9.5 million seems to be the fetching price for every free agent defenseman, especially Seth Jones, by far, in my opinion, the worst that comes to mind.
Regret drafting him, that's for sure.
Oh my God! And as you said, man, that's brutal to see Flower have to deal with that. 4-0 in 12 minutes of the first period. Brutal, absolutely brutal. But yeah, Charlie McAvoy. I mean, I don't get the $9.5 million. I got to be completely honest with you. He seems like a very good defensive-minded defenseman, which is not somebody that fetches that much money. I feel like the 9.5, 10 million mark is for the Brent Burns and Erik Karlsson when he was in his prime, Alex Pietrangelo, these more offensive-minded D-men. Yeah, I mean, he's got a great plus-minus. I know you think that's a stupid stat, but I mean, he's got a plus 81 in 236 games as far as that goes. 122 points. It's not horrible for a guy that's primarily defensive minded instead of being like trying to put the puck in the net. Yeah, it's interesting because the cap's not moving.
Yep.
We know that, or at least not moving drastically. And we're seeing all these guys sign for 9.5. And that's just mind blowing to me. It absolutely is.
And that's what's interesting is like, if you look up his stats, like you said, 236 games, 122 points, only 19 of those points are in the power play. So that's what I'm saying. Like, he's not heavily utilized in the power play for, again, not necessarily being that offensive guy, but the way I kind of look at him as is obviously, height and whatnot difference a bit different, but as Blues fans they might understand, or if there's Flames fans who listen to this that kind of remember back in the day too, probably like a smaller Jay Bouwmeester in his prime, where he was just this guy who would just absolutely lock things down on the ice defensively, would put up 40, 50 points for a few years, and then obviously, kind of come down off his prime a little bit. I kind of see that the same for McAvoy, quite honestly. But again, he's only 23. His contract's going to end when he's 31. So I feel like that's also been the new norm of the league too, where Suzuki, McAvoy, Tkachuk, these guys are getting, 7, 8, 9 million a year, and they're just hitting 22, 23, and they're still going to be in for a big payday when that's up, assuming, health and production stays, somewhat there. So it's interesting how teams are definitely taking this more throw the money at him now and pray for the best versus but the Doug Armstrong special, the 2-year, 3-year prove it kind of bridge deal type situation. But there's pros and cons obviously to both. So
absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about suspensions. There's been quite a few, and injuries, because I don't know about you, but my fantasy leagues have been hurting to say the least. Yeah. We talked a little bit about the injuries that were happening in Vegas, but let's talk a little bit about the suspensions that are happening everywhere else in the league. Colorado Avalanche forward Gabriel Landeskog suspended for 2 games without pay for his boarding against Kirby Dach, which was brutal.
Yeah.
And those guys, I know I've mentioned this before. They seem pissed. Landeskog, McKinnon, that whole Avalanche crew, they're ready. They're like, what the hell? We're always like the favored team here. And they just seem hungry. They want it, and they're starting to play a little dirty. And I mean, what could be said other than it makes sense? There was, that boarding against Kirby Dach. He assessed the minor penalty. with 3 minutes, 38 seconds left in that 4-2 home victory, which is crazy. They were already winning. Why is he acting like that anyways? $70,000, 2 games. Do you think that's justified?
Oh, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously he's not a repeat offender by any means, but guy's on his knees. You see he's on his knees. You have a full second plus to react to that, and you still staple him to the boards. What the hell are you doing? I don't care who you are. But yeah, I mean, those 2 games make sense. I think that's a fair place to start things. Obviously, it's hurting them short term because not only do you have McKinnon out, now you have Landeskog out here for the game and the Blues, which again, by the way, was a fucking roller coaster at the end. I can get into that later. But yeah, I mean, 2 games I think is fair. I mean, he's never really done it before. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think Kirby Duck had a whole lot of repercussions in terms of injury from that. So I think that might have played a little bit of part too. So I think that's a fair starting point for
Wasn't
sure.
he the guy though that like had his like wrist completely snapped last season? Was it Kirby Doc or is it the other young guy I was talking about or that they had?
Thought it was Doc. But yeah, he got that done in the World Juniors, I believe.
Yeah, right. And he missed that shit. So it's like obviously their nerves are on edge when it comes to that too. He just suffered this crazy injury very early in his career. And then this guy that's like, I don't know, man. It just seems to me that they're very angry and very especially after their loss last year in the playoffs against the Knights. They're hungry. So it's either gonna pan out for them or they're gonna look like a bunch of jackasses just throwing their weight around and getting angry, I guess.
Agreed.
So yeah, suspension wise, Dylan Larkin. Now here, my opinion kind of switches a little bit because Dylan Larkin got a game for roughing Tampa Bay forward Matthew Joseph. The league announced that the penalty would include him giving up 30,000 and change towards the player's emergency fund. So I watched that. I didn't watch the game, but I watched the highlights. I watched the clips. I think he was hit, and when he was on the ground, the guy that he swung on kind of like threw a stick back in his face. Did you see that? When he was on the ground, it was definitely like just Bush League across the board. So yeah, that sucked that happened and he retaliated the way he did. Had he not thrown that punch, I guess, before dropping his gloves, he probably wouldn't have been suspended. I guess that's my thought process there. What do you think about that whole play?
I don't think he should have been suspended whatsoever.
Yeah,
in my eyes, I would have seen, just based off the excessive nature of what he did, kind of blindly hitting someone, maybe a double minor. I can maybe at a stretch see a major, but kind of leave it at that. I mean, he got, hit face first into the boards. I mean, Larkin spent, 8 weeks in a, like a collar with his injury. And I don't know if you remember his or not, but there's no penalty, no suspension on his play whatsoever. So I feel like it hits home to him as well. Like I've gone through this before and nobody did anything about it. So now I'm getting hit behind again and having flashbacks of that. I'm pissed off. So what do? I turn around and just blindly punch the first person I see on the opposing team, thinking that they're the one who did it. So, I mean, yeah, give him a double minor, give him a major, fine him an extra 5-10 grand after the fact. Like, suspend a guy for that. I mean, seen way worse. You've seen Tom Wilson, pull down a Panarin, by his hair, a slew foot him or whatever. Obviously, different degrees of what's going on, but
I mean, PK didn't get a suspension for that slew foot, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you could argue it was or wasn't. I mean,
it was, but
yeah. So
it's not too often, ladies and gentlemen, that you and I agree on these calls that happen.
True.
So when it happens, I think that's a sure cut scenario where we can say that happened. That was the slew foot. That was a dirty hit. And yeah, like you see these guys pushing their faces in the ice and kind of smacking each other upside the head. It happens. It really does. And clearly he was pissed because He was on the ground. He got that dirty hit. He got a stick in the face. He's going to get up and fucking do what he has to do. It's not his fault he didn't drop gloves before he did it, I guess. Like, and
Yeah.
he kind of did that. I think the SWAT is what got him the suspension.
Yeah.
It was the SWAT, then he threw the gloves. Had he just thrown the gloves and went to the guy, we wouldn't even be talking about it.
Agreed. Yeah. And again, like I said, I think it's a combination of having to spend 2 months kind of in like a neck brace from a prior hit that happened to him and getting no suspension on it, then getting hit again in a similar fashion, now having a penalty called on it, and then you get the stick in the face and you're pissed off, probably flashbacks go through your head and you're just like, I'm fucking sick of this. I'm taking it into my own hands, and you punch a guy and then you try to fight him. And I mean, there's been way more borderline things called for suspension that haven't been called. There's, in terms of that, like things were like, okay, this guy's for sure getting a game, and the league's like, nah, we're not even gonna look at it. Where this is just like, okay, you punched the guy in the chest or stomach before you fought him, you're out of game. I'm just like, that's soft, I feel like, personally.
And it also had to do with the fact that it was in slow motion and the camera was like right on him when he did it. I feel like had it had been like just this like scrap in front of the net and like the camera angle didn't quite see something that crazy, because did Wilson even wind up getting fined like for that?
I don't.
When he
slammed, I think he might have been.
ice?
I think he might have been fined, but I don't think he was. He was suspended. No, not whatsoever.
And he literally took the dude and just went whop. And it wasn't like a clear cut shot. It was like something that people had to highlight, go back and like pull up on Twitter, Instagram, all that shit. Yep. So yeah, I think it just looks bad on the league if they don't do anything about it, because he clearly got up and showed his aggression. I'm with you though. I didn't think it was suspension worthy personally. So yeah, we have quite a few questions that we should answer. I think we should spend a little time answering questions. We haven't done it in a while. If you guys are tuning in, this is the third episode we've done this season so far. We had our 50th episode. Go back and watch that. It was awesome. And then we did our first interview ever with Cam Jansen, St. Louis Blues legend.
Oh yeah.
Such a good interview. If you haven't watched it, go back and listen to it or watch it. It's on YouTube, Spotify, all that great stuff. So the questions start with our good friend Peter Bajornev. I'm sure I ruined his name. I know that he's responsible for the podcast Jablam Sports, and I've been on a show. It's been a great time. He had a question. He said, I love jerseys. I'm on the fence with these new VGK jerseys. So I guess he's talking about the gold ones.
I would assume so.
Yeah, that's the newest ones. He said, when will they come out with a new one that's a different logo than the main one? Okay, so no. He's probably not talking about gold. He's secondary, the ones that they had for Lake Tahoe.
Okay.
I guess that's what he's talking about. He wants to know when he thinks the team will come out with a new one. So I think a lot of people were expecting it to be this year because it's their 5th year in the league and they're trying to highlight the V. And they really should have explored that a little bit more, because obviously Vegas Golden Knights, and they've been doing that highlight thing 5th year. I don't see it happening this year. I think they're going to focus mainly on the gold ones. There really hasn't been a lot of talk. And then they're going to have the All-Star game here. So they're going to have the All-Star jerseys as well. So they're going to have a little bit of difference when it comes to that. I think it's not crazy to think that next season they're going to introduce them, mainly because there's going to be a lot of highlight on that, because Bill Foley said playoffs in 3, cup in 6. And so I think a lot of fans have, like, from the very beginning kind of like held on to, they're going to win the cup in year 6. It's going to happen, or by year 6. So I think they're going to highlight that, and they have to do something with that secondary logo, because a lot of people liked it. But yeah, the reverse retro kind of got done, and they're not utilizing it anymore.
Yeah. And I guess my thought process is on it. I mean, personally speaking, I'm a big fan of the secondary logo of the Knights. I think that they have no issue recycling that and just redoing the whole jersey around that logo, as opposed to the reverse retro with the homage to Las Vegas Thunder and whatnot back in the day with the stripes. But I think that logo is fine. You can find probably a very solid jersey to make around it, and I don't see any need to be in your 5th year, 6th year, even to put out a 4th or 5th jersey at that point. I think that's overkill personally, but yeah, I think it's more than doable for them to use that for sure. Again, just in a different scheme of colors, if you will. So
All right, I got to interrupt the podcast to talk about another one of our amazing sponsors. That's right, Black Heart Inc. is not only a tattoo brand, but a culture in itself. Established since 2021, right here in Las Vegas, Nevada, Black Heart provides the highest in quality and luxury in custom body art. Black Heart Inc. is a tattoo shop like no other around the Las Vegas area. And ever since I moved here, I've been searching around. So trust me, there's some quality work going out of this shop, providing acceptance of all walks of life through the art, the communication of the image that displays or conveys a statement. It can be very powerful. Through art and tattoos, Black Heart Inc. will continue to defy the status quo, not just now, but for years to come. Make sure you check them out at www.blackheartinc702.com. If you mention the Fourth Line Goon Hockey Podcast, you can get $60 Halloween flash tattoos. That's right, $60 gets you a creepy new tattoo this October. They can do same-day appointments, local and group discounts. They make sure they honor the military. And if you go in and you mention the Fourth Line Goon Hockey Podcast and that you're a VGK fan, they will do a $100 flash tattoo of a Vegas Golden Knights logo. That's right, a $100 flash tattoo of a Vegas Golden Knights logo. I got one myself on my arm. So make sure you guys check it out, www.blackheartinc702.com.
But totally. So Wesley Lohr wants to know our stance on the kicking goals that have been surrounding the league recently. Which
I'm glad
there's
that came
been a
up.
lot. Yeah, I know I will let you lead off with this. There's clearly been a lot recently, even in just the few games that's happened this season. What is your stance on it?
Yeah, so I was gonna say, if anyone brought this up question wise, I was gonna make sure to address it. But I mean, yeah, you had the goal with Stevenson against the Kraken. You had the goal with Chris Tierney on the Senators, and then last night you had the Blues and Avalanche.
Yep.
2 minutes left. They kick in the goal to tie the game. It actually gets called back. The first two were reviewed and called good goals. It's obviously, personally speaking, I think the rule needs to be rewritten, redefined. It's too vague. Distinct kicking motion, that's so subjective. Each person's going to view that a bit differently. It's not going to be the same. I mean, in my eyes, the way I look at it is Stevenson, on his side, he's moving forward. He doesn't make a position to stop. He takes his whole skate blade off the ice, turns his foot, and actually kicks his whole leg forward. Personally, I think it's a kicking motion. Again, I'm not the one making that call. I just think Toronto review rooms in midseason form day one, personally, aka being just absolute shit at making these calls. But then you have the Tierney one where his skate's on the ice and he just kind of stretches his foot forward completely. It's not really it's a slide. He's sliding his foot before the puck's there. He doesn't turn his foot by any means. That one, looking at it like 30 times, I can see maybe why that one stood. And then the one last night on the Avalanche, I mean, the guy's foot's, completely turned sideways on the ice. The puck's laying in the crease and his whole foot just comes forward and kind of slides it in the net. That one was probably the most obvious, I think, of the three. The Stevens one, I still think it probably shouldn't have been called. The Tierney one on the Senators, I see why you wouldn't call that in a sense. But I mean, I just think it's a point where you have this rule that's just been so vague for so long, and you've revamped so many other parts of the game, review process, offsides, all this other crap, right? And you can't find a way to change the verbiage or the rule around a kicking motion. And it's just, unfortunately been magnified here at the first week of hockey with 3 semi-controversial goals. But yeah, that's my take on it.
So I guess we've kind of established with these games, at least early on, that if it hits the side of your toque, you're good. Like even if you change the position, it's more of that like kicking motion with it being in front of your boot.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know. I think they need to change it. I'm with you on that. But I don't know if you agree with me. I think they should just change it to where if the puck goes in the fucking net, it counts. Like, I don't understand, short of picking the puck up and throwing it in, I don't get why the difference is there. Like, headbutt it in, like elbow it in, chest it in. The puck went in the net. Like, I don't understand why we have to like figure out whether it's intentional. Like, I don't know, man, because like you said, if you're trying to stop, you're like, okay, I can see that. No, but I also see the reverse side of that. If you're trying to stop, you can also like slide into the puck, like you're purposely trying to deflect the puck in.
It's a fine line, right? I mean, you play hockey to use a stick to score a goal, right? If you're playing soccer, for example, you use your foot to kick a ball in the net. If the ball hits the pinky finger, it's a handball. It doesn't count.
What about your head, though?
If you, obviously different rules, right? So
no, but in soccer, I don't know that. You can headbutt the puck in, or the ball.
You can kick the ball in. It can go off of your torso or legs or butt or neck or whatever. But if it hits any part of your extremity of your arm, it doesn't count. So like I get that aspect of it from you have a puck you're meant to use, or you have a puck and a stick, you're meant to use the stick to put the puck in the net, right? Like that's the common goal. Using your foot as an extra sort of stick, if you will, just to have this in the convenient spot shouldn't be allowed, because you could just pop up in soccer and just punch something in real quick. Oh cool, I scored a goal, which would kind of be stupid, I feel like. So I get there's an integrity to it.
It also might kind of like bring up the energy a little bit. I mean, and also we're talking about a circumference of a ball as opposed to a puck. Like,
yeah, but then you're all of a sudden gonna transition the game into soccer, because you're gonna have how many other guys knowing that I can legally kick a puck in the net, just trying to kick stuff constantly. It's just, I think it's gonna change the game in a way that it shouldn't be going to, personally.
I think we're focusing too much on it. And like you said, I agree. It's like there's a gray area. There's a thin line. What is a kicking motion? Is it intentional or not? To me, it's just insane. It's hard to distinguish whether or not someone was like trying to stop, kicking the puck in.
Yep.
So like I agree with you that the Chandler Stevenson thing, he did redirect his skate, but like he also knew while redirecting his skate, like I'm not moving my foot. I'm changing the direction.
Bottom half of his leg moved forward, separate from his whole body.
That's and then it landed though, and then the puck hit it. It's not like he pushed it with his foot. Like he changed the direction, but
the intent was there to have the kicking motion occur. But, like the fact that it hit prior, like I think that's, again, the way the rules are written.
Intention is hard. Yeah, intention is hard. Like, because like when you're playing hockey, your intention is to get the fucking puck in the net, whether or not you don't even think. It's just like very barbaric almost. It's like that puck needs to get in that net. Fuck everyone that's standing in front of me. And so why wouldn't you take that chance, right? Like if you got a guy like Pat Maroon in front of the fucking net, like just stirring up shit, and he gets the opportunity to kick it in, like actually willingly and knowingly kicking the puck in, why wouldn't you do it? Let the outside sources figure out what his intentions were. It's a weird argument. It's like you never know the intention of the play unless somebody's like literally smacking the puck. Like hand pass makes sense to me, because you're taking the puck out of the air, and you have the option to set it down, but you can't toss it, right? Or you can't, like, I think you could smack it, but you can't physically grab it and toss it.
It's a discretionary type rule as well. Yeah.
It just gets so like sketchy whether or not the intention of like just having the puck on the play on a stick is your intention, or if you're just like saying fuck it, put it in. I mean, and clearly we've seen now 3 times in the first week of NHL hockey that this is a problem. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see this brought up. I mean, maybe not this year, probably coming up, they'll talk about how they can reword it, especially with ESPN getting involved. They're trying to like revamp things and keep them exciting. I mean, you never know where they're going to go with it. But yeah, great question. Wesley, I'm glad you brought it up. we were going to talk about it for sure, but and now we didn't. So thank you so much for asking the questions. Thank you so much for tuning in. Like I said, go back, watch those interviews, watch the podcasts. Add us on Facebook at Fourth Line Goon. You can find me. I'm just gonna do this. We can do the Twitter. The Twitter's down there. I'm gonna add it in later. And yeah, make sure you add us and let's talk hockey. We appreciate you guys so much, and we'll chat with you next week. I'm gonna do it.
See you on Wednesday too, fucker, for the Blues.
Oh
Blues
yeah,
Knights. Don't forget about that.
So I was gonna end this with a Jello shot. I made because it's Sunday. This is my day off, and we usually make like something in the crock pot. Today it's not a stew. It's a roast. We did chili last week. Yeah, we should talk about that. So we'll end this with talking about we're going to go to the game in Vegas
while you take a Jello shot.
While I take a Jello shot. So the Blues are playing the Knights in Vegas on Wednesday. You're going to be here. Andy's coming in. Your brother's coming in too.
He'll be there too. Yeah. So I've told myself this time because, again, as I've told you, and you know, every single time I've caught a Blues game in Vegas, granted, they've only won once. The one time they won, I was in the country. Every other time it's been a loss. Most likely come from behind win for the Knights in overtime, generally speaking, or a shootout, which sucks. So I told myself whatever I ended up paying for my ticket, I'm betting to win that same amount on the Knights. And I just said at this point, I'm sick of paying, $100 to watch my team lose and have nothing to show for it. So I'm okay paying $200 to see my team lose. And I went to a hockey game for free versus alternatively, again, I paid $200 and I got my team win out of it finally in Vegas, which would be nice. And damn well I'm going to be wearing my Blues legend James Neal jersey too.
Fair. So my prediction is the fact that I think we're going to see a blowout on one end or the other. I don't think it's going to be close because it seems too weird that it would continue this long into not a rivalry. That seems like the wrong terminology. I think we're going to see a blowout. I really do. And I don't know. I'm excited though. We're going to have some drinks. We're going to have a good time. I'm very much looking forward to it. And
you'll have to text me where your seats are too, so you can find anything close by also.
Yeah, we'll work it out. So yeah. So cheers everybody.
Later guys. Oh, geez, you weren't kidding. You're just going at it.